Arpon Basu covers the Montreal Canadiens for The Athletic. We saw him ambling through the Wall Center lobby here. And
Can't get past us.
Absolutely.
No way.
Just
Threw
a
out the
random,
hook,
a random
yanked him
stranger
into
waving
the
at you, which I'm
studio.
sure you get a lot, but I was like, wow, I actually know those guys.
Yeah.
Say hello.
Welcome to Vancouver.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm surprised it's misting outside. But
Yeah, I know our city has a rep. Swear to God, it was 18 degrees and sunny. I played golf.
There hasn't been a
yesterday
cloud in the
afternoon.
sky
Exactly.
for 5 days, and now
my
you
welcoming
after
committee.
come the
Yeah,
visitors, and
it's
welcome.
comforting. I find this is something I need when I get to Vancouver. Yeah.
Well, welcome back. 3 years in a row now without the playoffs for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's it going?
We've been there, buddy, so we can empathize. We're here
Well,
for any kind of emotional support.
It's just real. I mean, the funny thing is you go from the Stanley Cup final appearance to this directly, like straight into a rebuild. Obviously, losing Shea Weber and Carey Price the way they did, they couldn't have anticipated that. And any team would get rocked by losing like the two pillars of your franchise in one fell swoop, especially Price, just because he, single-handedly corrected so much for this franchise for so long. But it is what it is. I mean, it's reality. This day was coming.
Mm-hmm.
The fact it came right after a Stanley Cup final appearance was a bit jarring, but I think everyone knew it was coming. And the fan base has been clamoring for the Canadiens to do a proper build for a long time.
And that says it all, Arpon, because if there was one fan base that had expectations set above and beyond, it was Montreal, right? The Cup parade taking the usual route. And if Montreal Canadiens fans are like, no, we think we need to rebuild, you can rebuild anywhere, right? Like fans will give you the rope and the leash to rebuild it.
And this was the big fear. Jeff Molson said repeatedly, we don't think our fans would accept a rebuild. Marc Bergevin said, we don't think our fans would accept a rebuild. But if you were born in 1990, what are you? You're 34 years old today, and you have no memory of a Canadiens parade. You'd be 3 years old. Maybe you have faint memories of the last Canadiens parade, but you're a grown adult, probably with children and a mortgage and all these things, and you have not experienced a Stanley Cup. And the reality is that to get there, you have to go through something like this, and you have to add the pieces necessary that you only add at the top of the draft to do it.
In a few years' time, who's the superstar on this team? Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caufield? Who's the guy?
I'm starting to lean Slafkovsky just because of the unique package he presents. There's not a lot of 230-pound men skating around in the NHL and doing the things that he does with his hands, his vision. He's learning the rhythm of the game in North America at like an extraordinarily fast rate. You think back, Canadiens were on a trip through Vegas, Arizona, and St. Louis in early November, and everyone, including some people within the Canadiens organization, thought they had to send him to Laval because he just looked so lost on the ice. And so the AHL seemed like a likely destination. And to Marty St. Louis' credit, as that discourse was reaching its height, instead of demoting him or instead of he put him on the top line the next game. The last game of that trip, Slafkovsky played with Caufield and Suzuki, and he scored in that game. And from that point, it took him some time. It took him about a month. But from mid-December on, he's just been an extraordinarily effective 19-year-old forward who's, turns 20 at the end of this month. And since then, he's been like on I think, pretty much a 60-point pace over an 82-game season. So he's figured a lot out. If he continues, he's not going to obviously continue growth at the same rate his whole life. But by 22, this guy's going to be a really unique force in the league, I think, is just with his combination of hockey sense, size, and hands that just doesn't really exist in the NHL.
Frankie Corrado was saying that he thinks this team still does fight a lot of nights as it pertains to the game versus the Canucks. Do you expect them to fight? I mean, they fought valiantly versus the Oilers.
They fought valiantly versus the Oilers. They fought valiantly against the Bruins at home, lost that game in overtime. Leafs at home, they lost, on a fluky goal with 7 minutes left in regulation. Took Tampa to overtime in Tampa, took Florida to overtime in Florida. Like, this is just in the last 9 games. So it's really extraordinary to see. Like, there's a definite talent deficit. There's going to be a talent deficit tomorrow night. Last night they were down 2-0 going into the third. They could have packed it in easily.
Completely.
Didn't do that. Frankly, lost on a real miss of a call. Like, I mean, they got called. You know, Yoel Armia gets a double minor for high sticking with 20 seconds left, but Vander Kane hits him without the puck. Stick comes up, catches Henrique in the mouth. 100%, that's a double minor, but the Kane penalty, you can't add it after the fact. They reviewed it, but that's a bad bounce for them. And really, they went into overtime with as much chance of winning that game as the next guy, but they had to defend a 4-on-3, which they did for 3 minutes. Like they had 15 seconds left against McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, that whole gang. So yeah, this team competes, man. They fight and they have a belief in what Marty, who's obviously missing right now, but then the coaching staff are building as far as a way to play and just an identity. Like this team definitely has an identity, and not quitting is one of them.
How's our old friend Brendan Gallagher doing, and is he still the cheeriest man in hockey?
Less cheery. I think he's
lesser role.
Yes,
so
lesser role. I think that's something that Brendan Gallagher is going to have to grapple with. I think he's still an effective player. His issue and his problem is going to be for the rest of this contract is that contract at $6.5 million a year. You can't be a third, fourth line grinding forward. But if you took that away, Brendan Gallagher is still an effective hockey player. You know, he's a valuable member of the team. Last night he blocked a shot with his left hand. The poor guy, like the same hand that Shea Weber broke, the same hand that Johnny Boychuk broke. Hit it again last night. I think it was Matthias Ekholm. So, but that's Brendan Gallagher. You know, he's a gamer. He played an amazing game last night. So the contract is an issue. But I always think of Brendan Gallagher. I always think of Dustin Brown. You remember when Dustin Brown signed that long contract and everyone's like, oof, that's going to age poorly. Not only did he finish that contract, he signed another contract before retiring. So yes, the $6.5 million doesn't look good, but if you just look at Gallagher, the player, any team would want a player like that on their team. Not at that number, but at some point, what's done is done. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. So.
He not only signed another contract, they built a statue.
Yes, exactly.
and
I don't think Brendan Gallagher is going to get a statue outside the Bell Center.
I was going to say, and presumably got the spelling and grammar correct on that statue.
Exactly. I think the bar is a little higher in Montreal than LA, but still, he's got a statue next to like Kobe Bryant and and Magic Johnson. Like
the Vancouver Canucks did a ceremony for him. It was the damnedest thing. We were like, who does Dustin Brown have pictures on?
That toothless smile's adorable.
Exactly.
Come on.
Okay.
Wait a minute. The Vancouver Canucks did a ceremony for Dustin Brown, like for his retirement?
Like
it rings a bell. I did not file it, but yeah, that rings a bell.
Why?
Yeah.
We have no earthly idea.
That's hilarious.
It was more of a salute than ceremony.
Still, come on.
Was it his last game? Was it his absolute last game here?
Was it a pregame or a TV timeout?
I think it was a TV timeout.
I think it was TV timeout.
Okay, well, that's different. That's okay.
Yeah.
If it was a pregame thing, that would be a little bit much.
It's like what we saw with Oshie the other night here.
Right.
But you talk about statues and monuments, and that dovetails nicely into what I want to talk about, because as we long noted for the better part of a decade, there were some terrific British Columbia hockey players playing for the Montreal Canadiens.
We've mentioned 3 already today.
And there were some terrific Quebecois hockey players playing here.
You got one in town on the coaching staff.
Yeah, indeed. Is Carey Price's number going to be retired by the Habs?
I think it should. I don't know if it will. It's because it's not that simple. It's easier to make the Hockey Hall of Fame than to get your number retired by the Canadiens.
Well,
like way easier.
For those who don't know, there was a time when there was 7 retired numbers in the history of the Montreal Canadiens. Guys like Larry Robinson and Ken Dryden did not meet the standard to be immortalized at the Forum and then Bell Center. They have now sort of opened the floodgates.
A little bit.
They're all Hockey Hall of Famers, but there's been a lot of number retirements in the last 20 years.
If you get into the Hockey Hall of Fame and you reach a certain minimum number of games played for the Canadiens, you get inducted into their Ring of Honor, which is it's basically graffiti around the top. Like, no, it's not graffiti, but you get your picture and your name around the top ring above the nosebleeds in the Bell Center. You also get your picture in the dressing room of the Canadiens. The number is a higher bar, even though they let in a bunch of guys that they should have done a long time ago. Guy Lapointe, another one. You know, I mean, it's just like
guys like Elmer Locke, who played in the 50s, and Emile Bouchard were only recognized in the last 15 years.
Exactly. So, I mean, the bar there is not just a cup; it's like multiple cups. But the thing about the Canadiens, and like I think Saku Koivu's number should be retired personally, because you have to recalibrate. Like this team is never going to be the Canadiens of old,
the 50s,
and they clearly aren't. They haven't won a cup in 31 years. So I mean, it's you have to recalibrate for your new reality and let those generations of fans see their best favorite players recognized. Saku Koivu is tied with Jean Beliveau for the longest tenure as captain of the Canadiens. He, were it not for injuries, probably would have had a much better playing career, but still was a total gamer in the playoffs, always showed up. One of the best players in Finland national team history, and just the work he did in the community in Montreal.
Cancer survivor,
bought like a
emotional nights
sophisticated
ever.
Cancer, equipment for Montreal that didn't exist in the city before him. And I see Carey Price kind of the same way. Like, for a generation of Canadiens fans, he was the man. They loved him. You still look today. Last night in Edmonton, there were a ton of Canadiens fans at that game. The most common number was 31. And so I think the Canadiens need to recalibrate this. The problem is that there's still guys from that era that haven't gotten up there. And at some point, you need numbers to fill out a hockey team.
Yes, you do.
Right.
So I get the issue, but I think Carey Price is going to go into the Hall of Fame. He's the franchise leader in wins, was the face of the franchise for over a decade, brought them to a conference final where they really had a chance of winning the cup, were it not for Chris Kreider crashing into him, and a Stanley Cup final where they had no business being, were it not for Carey Price. So I think he deserves it. Whether he gets it, I don't know.
There's so many numbers out of circulation for the Montreal Canadiens. I remember like 20 years ago, they scored the 10,000th goal in club history, and it was like 93 from 97 and 91.
It was Sergei Berezin, of all people.
Yes. Right. With Gilmore on the assist. I think it might have been Gilmore and Juno, guys who were wearing numbers.
I'll phone Vinny Domfus and Thomas Mechanics and tell them to stand down. I don't expect they'll be getting the call here.
So now the flip side question, which you may have seen here in December. The Canucks chose to honor Roberto Luongo in their Ring of Honor and not retire.
Did they have any retired numbers?
Well, yes. Yes, they have the.
But not him.
They franchise leader in every goaltending category. Retired in Florida.
Yeah.
2 stints with Florida. More games in Florida, although it's close.
Yeah.
Best success here in Vancouver, needless to say. And they put him in the Ring of Honor. They did not retire. Now, the old Canadiens management would approve of that sort of standard.
Well, whose numbers are retired?
There's 6 numbers. The Twins, Bure, Naslund, Linden, and Smeal.
I think Luongo fits in that group. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
I don't, I mean, that's a great group. No, I think Luongo fits right in that group. I mean, he was the face of the team for a long time. Like, that's kind of my standard is if for a 5-year period, if anyone who thought of the Vancouver Canucks thought of you or whatever franchise, then you merit consideration at the very least. And, he was either the best goalie or a top 3 goalie in the league during his time in Vancouver. Obviously had some playoff mishaps.
Category leader, and they're good category defensemen. Of course, there were not any good category leaders in defensemen, but those are good category numbers.
Yeah,
for Roberto Luongo,
and I think he'll be general manager of the Montreal Canadiens one day.
Oh yeah, that's very possible. Ken Hughes might have something to say about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going down the road.
Before you go, Canucks are having this season out of nowhere. People expected them better, but not this good. What do you think the reaction is of Habs fans? Not that they're asked about the Canucks a lot, but what do you think the perception is of the Vancouver Canucks where you're from?
I think
back east.
I mean, I think they still need to sell some people on how real this is, you know, and I was fascinated watching just the whole PDO debate around this team as the sample size got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just couldn't really deny that, okay, these guys are beating the odds in that sense, or they're playing in a way that encourages a high shooting percentage or a high save percentage or what have you. But if you don't watch them every night, it's hard to believe that right from afar, and not many people out east watch them every night. So yeah, from that perspective, it's a tough sell. I look at Vancouver as one of those teams, like New Jersey last year, where now you're in an environment where you're expected to perform, you're expected to win, and it's tough in the playoffs. It gets difficult. Jersey pulled it off in the first round. Eventually got knocked out, but that's a stage that you have to go through. So I think the real benefit for Vancouver, I don't think they're going to come out of the West, but whatever they do in the playoffs this year is going to be a great launching pad for next year for them. just because it's somewhat found money for this group. Like, this is a lot quicker than I think anyone could have reasonably expected Vancouver to be in this position. And that's great for the franchise, and that's great for whatever they're trying to build. And like, kudos to Rick Tocchet and everything he's done. Like, I think it's a great story. But you know, I think expectations need to be tempered based on where this team came from just last year.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge jump. And you rarely see a team make that huge jump in the regular season and carry that into the playoffs as well.
The one thing a lot of these, arriving on the scene teams don't have those goaltending. Like the Jersey didn't have gold.
Yeah.
And the Canucks do have that.
Well,
so.
Yes, that's
and
true.
Should mention, I know they were a perennial playoff team, but Vegas missed the playoffs the year before they won the Cup. We've seen several examples of that in the last 20 years, which you almost never saw in the long history of the NHL.
Very rare. Except for the Canadiens making the final and then getting knocked out. But I mean, what I mean is that generally speaking, there are exceptions, obviously, but generally speaking, a group of players needs to learn the unique pressures of a playoff series before they can get through them.
Yeah.
Maybe, listen, what I said earlier, Vancouver has bucked the odds all year. Maybe they'll buck it again. Like, maybe this trend or this tendency will not apply to them, just like the PDO tendency didn't apply to them. And if they do, power to it. Listen, I mean, it's great to count on, and Montreal had this for a while, but when you have like a dominant forward, a dominant defenseman, and a dominant goaltender, you should be able to build around those pieces and build a really difficult team to stop, especially in the playoffs. Montreal never figured out a way to do it, but you know, look at the pieces around Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko. Well, not Demko, but Hughes and Pettersson. And there's some interesting matchup difficulties with this team in the playoffs. It's just my only concern for them would be not having done it before, not knowing how to do it. That takes time. That you need to learn that, generally speaking, but who knows? I mean, the talent's there.
Fair question.
Last question for you, because he likes to write in bars. He likes to flee the arena, find a loud happening spot to do his work. Do you have a spot in Vancouver? Where was your Olympic spot here?
I didn't do the Olympics here.
Oh.
So I wasn't able to do that, but I don't have a spot in Vancouver. I'm here so rarely. I think this is going to be only my second game covered in Vancouver. Okay. So I'll take recommendations.
We'll send you over to Greta Skordova.
Okay.
They got a scene going on.
All right.
Lots of noise. You'll be right at home.
I'll be right at home. As long as they got Wi-Fi.
Yep.
I'm all good.
Arpon Basu, nice to see you. Thanks for this.
Great seeing you guys. Like seeing the hub of the media empire.
Oh, yeah, this is where it all starts.
Yeah, absolutely. The Sekeres and Price empire. This is headquarters. This is great.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.